of Truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ, or Iglesianicristo.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome to INCRadio Florida. I'm one of your hosts, Brother Robert Topalis, here on a beautiful Saturday morning here. It's about 9:30 in the morning on the East Coast of the United States here today, Saturday, July 6th. I can't believe that the year has passed so quickly. We're already more than halfway through the year, but today we are going to be talking about a topic that is so Florida. I can't think of anything that's more Florida than talking about the springs that are here in Florida. They are all over the state. And if you've come here, typically you come here for the beaches, you come to Florida typically for amusement parks, good weather, maybe some championship sports teams, but you really are coming here to experience the real Florida. If that's your purpose, then you've got to check out some of our Florida springs. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've got the pleasure of having a couple of my co-hosts with me here today who are Florida spring experts, especially since this past weekend was my first time to a Florida spring. So we're going to get to talk about that in just a second. But I'd like to introduce Sister Maricel Soria. Sister Maricel Soria, who is are you still in that newlywed phase, Sister Maricel?
Happily, yes, Brother Robert.
Still are, right? I think it's only been like 3 weeks, so that newlywed phase. I know Sister Audrey, who's here with us as well, she's still going through her newlywed phase right after 2 years. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Still.
Yeah, yes, with new chapters and new additions to it. It's like
Yeah,
the
I
newlywed
think
phase 2.0.
you have to you have to actually surrender that newlywed label once you have children. So that's coming soon. So we'll be looking forward to that as well. But before we go, of course, to the show, we want to thank everyone who's joining us this morning, because this show is, of course, only possible when you're joining us. Please engage and send us any tips, any questions, or anything that you may want to give us a shout out for in the chat. We're live right now here on INCRadio Florida. But I'm going to turn it over to Sister Maricel, who's going to be talking to us about the Florida Springs, because the Florida Springs are such such an iconic part of Florida that so many people don't know about. Can you tell us about the Florida Springs, Maricel?
I would be happy to. Give me 1 second. Can everyone see the?
We can.
Awesome. All right, so here we have a beautiful photo of our most recent Springs trip. This is Rainbow Springs. As you can hear us saying, we are talking about not just one spring, but many. So what constitutes a Florida spring? By definition, a Florida springs or any Florida springs are natural openings in the ground where groundwater flows from the aquifer to the surface. So pressure within or underground in the earth pushes the water out of these natural stores of groundwater up towards the surface, and it flows, and it creates these springs that we get to enjoy here in Florida. And these because the source is groundwater, these are freshwater springs. Florida springs are actually the largest in the world by volume. So if you put all the volume of the many springs in Florida together, it beats out springs in any other area of the earth. And this large volume gives birth to many ecosystems. And here you see a few examples of the different animals that we can see at the spring. So lots of fish, manatees, which many people come to see, especially during their mating season. They come into the springs from deeper waters. And then turtles and the infamous Florida gators.
Yeah, all of those are cute except for that bottom one on the left. Actually, I prefer to not have to see one.
Unfortunately, I have yet to see a manatee in the springs during my visits, but the other three I have seen. But thankfully, the gator I've seen was very, very small and tiny. Sister Audrey, have you seen any of these animals during your visits?
Oh yeah, all four. And they're really great. I mean, like it's not I have yet to encounter a full-size gator at the springs, and those reels or short videos that you see of like hidden in the seagrass there, and a huge gator is waiting. I have yet to have that experience happen to me. Not saying that it's not possible, but it's very unlikely that you would come into that danger, because otherwise they're the cute little ones. Cute little, I want to say they're the Cayman gators, I'm not sure. But they're the small ones off to the side. They'll get in the water, but they won't bother you.
Okay, I've got to just interject. The word cute is very subjective. So okay, when you're talking about gators, cute is a very subjective term, but
If it's any comfort, the only gator that I saw was when we went to a visit at Ginny Springs, and it was punking a turtle. So if a turtle can take on this small gator, I think we're okay.
I have a chance. Is that what you're saying? I stand a chance.
For sure. Like, it's probably just going to look at you, and then you can just keep going. As long as you don't bother it, it's not going to bother you. So Florida springs are not only good to see nature, but also the springs provide drinking water for the state, and also ecology for studying and recreation. So here you see just a few graphics demonstrating the different types of recreation that we do here in Florida at our springs. So some of these springs run deep enough to where you need scuba diving gear. That's really, really cool. But of course, you need training for that one. So I don't know if any of us have done that yet, at least here between our hosts.
I never knew that the springs were that deep. I thought that they were always like about maybe 3-4 feet deep, 5 feet deep at the most. But I didn't know you could. Well, I guess you could scuba dive even in shallow water, but I didn't know. Do we know how deep some of the springs go?
Yeah, some of the springs go as deep as like 60 feet, and that's just at the watering hole.
Wow.
Some springs, specifically like in the northern region, like so Jacksonville has the closest springs to them, being Ichetuckney. That's probably our largest springs that we have here in Florida. It's also the deepest. So at the little watering hole, beautiful, crystal clear, but you'll notice that the water looks darker because it's that much deeper. So you'll have, like, while kids and families are swimming around, you'll also have people coming in scuba gear, because that's where they train. So there's like almost like these underwater, like, mini caves, I guess, at the watering hole. So you can go as deep as you can without the pressure, but it goes even further. So that's Ichetuckney over there in north, like it's in like closer to in between Jacksonville and Tallahassee, and then also down there in it's called Devil's Den down in Gainesville. So same concept, watering hole, and it's just like this deep cavern that you just of mystery that you get to enjoy from the surface, but you'll also see people going down deep as well.
And for those of us who haven't been to springs, I know maybe the term watering hole may not be something that we know, or something that we know what it is referring to. So Sister Audrey, what is the watering hole in every spring?
Yeah, so it's like the point of entry. Some springs, like this Rainbow Springs, where we went to yesterday, you kind of start like in the middle of the river, of the flowing river, or flowing spring rather, but it's almost like your neighborhood cul-de-sac, right? So it's like that dead end where there's stairs or ramps that you can use to get yourself into the start of the springs. You can also, that's usually the end where most families will set up camp or set up at tables and just picnic, so that you can take your tube and go down the river from there. The only downside is you would probably have to take like the trolley or the tram back to that point, because it doesn't circle around. But
the current is not fun.
No, and it's so. Disclaimer, the springs are also very, very cold, and we'll explain that later on why. But this is usually for all of our water recreational goers that don't like cold water, this is where you do okay, all right, just ease into the water.
Yep, a constant 72 degrees. And Our other recreational activities that we love going to the springs for, because it's so hot here in Florida, is tubing. So we get these inflatable tubes and you float down the river, much like you would at any water park, except this one is a natural lazy river created by Mother Nature herself. And then in addition to that, if you don't feel like having your body directly in the water, you can kayak or canoe if you want to have someone in the boat with you. Obviously, that one takes a little bit more energy than the tubing.
Yeah, I wish somebody told me about that constant temperature at 72 when I got in for the first time yesterday, because you're thinking it's like 98 degrees outside, and then you go into the springs, and definitely a cooling experience for you.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the best, in my opinion, one of the best ways to cool off here in Florida. However, fair warning, it gets a little bit colder when you're already wet and then you go out of the water. So you have to be ready. You have to be prepared for that part. But yep, definitely a great way to cool off in the summer. I personally have only gone tubing and kayaking before. I think out of the two, I prefer the tubing.
A lot less work, right?
Yes. Oh, another one that we didn't include in this particular slide, though, is also paddleboarding. I think Sister Audrey has gone paddleboarding before too.
Yeah, I actually, it's like a good hybrid of kayaking, canoeing, and kayaking, canoeing, I clump in one, or tubing. Because with paddleboarding, like you still get the feel of the water, but some springs won't allow you to get into the water like you normally would in a tube, to preserve, depending on what kind of ecosystem they have. For most of those springs that won't allow you, it's because they have a higher manatee population, so they don't want the manatees to be disturbed in any way. So I prefer paddle boarding for those. It does take a little bit of core work and balance, especially if you decide to sit down and stand up all in without trying to fall into the water. But that would probably be my favorite.
That's a really good one. At least there's variety depending on what the springs that you're visiting allow. And before we show our pictures, we do have a few videos that we want to share. So in the ecosystems of the springs, you'll find this common, what we refer to as seagrass. And yes, there are fish and animals that are in this grass, but most of the time your feet won't touch it because you are floating above it. And then there you can see the view. This is from our most recent trip at Rainbow.
I think as recent as like yesterday, right?
24 hours. 24 hours ago,
That's where we were.
in the water.
Yes. Bright and early, because the springs are so popular, you have to beat everyone to it.
That's a perfect hack that we're sharing only with our viewers, because we want our viewers to be able to get in. But the springs, especially during weekends and holidays, if you intend to go tubing, if you intend to go kayaking, or anything that's going to require that park to be able to manage the number of guests, get there early. And when we say early, it's like get there before they open in some cases, because we were there yesterday at like, what was it, 6:45? I think we arrived, and there were already 7 cars at the gate waiting, and the gate doesn't even open till like 8 o'clock or close to 8 o'clock. So you want to get there because the parks will close to capacity. They want to be sure that they obviously try to preserve the integrity of the springs as well by not overcrowding it. And you want to be sure that you get there early so that way your family can actually have the full experience. And I mean, we were a couple of hours we were there. We got in the water by I think 8:30, and we floated a couple of miles down the springs, and we're done by like 10:30, 10:45. Yep. And you also can just walk around, and we'll see some photos of the springs in some of the other springs other than Rainbow Springs, where you can just kind of walk leisurely through the springs and really enjoy the surroundings. But yeah, here's another photo of what the springs actually look like underneath, and you can see that's just absolutely crystal clear. This doesn't even really do it justice, because when you're in the water, you see the light reflections in that seagrass. And one of the things you were talking about earlier, Sister Marisol, was how the springs are formed because that water is being pushed up through the ground. And as it's being pushed up through the ground, there are all these minerals, I think, like limestone and other minerals, which are purifying that water, which is why the water is so crystal clear, unlike many of the other springs that you'll find throughout the country. Yeah, we had a little tubing caravan going. So that's awesome. Well, we've got some photos too, because the one we were looking at was Rainbow Springs, and Rainbow Springs, of course, is one of the highly popular springs. Sister Audrey, about how many springs does Florida have?
And in all my research and experience, the internet says there are generally over 1,000 springs in Florida.
Wow.
And I mean, like and it ranges from your major springs that are in national parks that you can go to with your families, like what we do recreationally, anyone that's
Mhm.
Florida grown. um, I would say there's quite a few, maybe between 10 to 15 major springs that you can go to that have that large capacity, but springs can range from that being that large to being so small that it's um a neighborhood source of water that they can go to and filter their own water. So that would count technically as a spring because it's the same it's just the concept. It's water being pushed out from the ground, and then you can use it to either shower with or drink with, things like that. And it's a body of water that maintains a constant cold temperature year round.
It's 72, which us Floridians appreciate in the middle of July and August, right? So that's the one benefit for that. Well, and we also have got some photos here. So again, yesterday we were at Florida Rainbow Springs, and that was my very first time to a spring. I've lived here for 8 years almost 9 years in Florida, and this was my first trip to a spring. As you can see here, we had a pretty good group. I think 15, 16 of us that went. And that's Sister Marisol's parents there in the middle, Brother Jeff and Sister Louie, enjoying is that their first time to the springs as well?
Also, their first time.
All right, nice. Okay, we had a couple of first timers, so you could see us there. All you could see is me and my toes, but you can see Brother Jeff, Sister Louie that are there floating. And this shot's great because you could see we're obviously floating above water, but as you look directly down, you can see all that seagrass, and I think that seagrass is probably about 5 feet beneath us in this instance, and even at that depth you can see just all the clarity and everything of the seagrass. As you go down Rainbow, one of the things that I really appreciate is that it's like just floating down this river with all of these shacks and these homes and private residences. I mean, I kept thinking, how lucky are you to be able to live right off of the springs, and you could just wake up in the morning and go diving and tube your way down for lunch if you wanted to, right?
Yep. Another
Um,
half of those tracks are actually like timeshares or different rental properties too that you can
yes.
if you want to visit from out of town. And you have to bring your own tube, especially if you're visiting and you don't want to go all the way to the national park entrance to rent like what we did. But you have your own personal entrance, just drop down in the backyard.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about it earlier, because there is a one direction current, right? So there's
Mhm.
not that these springs will flow. So you drop yourself in a tube, and it's just going to take you downstream, and it's going to continue to take you downstream. So you've already got to have something in your head planned on how you're going to get back, because it's not going to likely be you trying to paddle your inner tube back 2 miles upstream. So just make sure that you figure that out before you jump in there, because that's not going to happen. The next one is actually some of the other springs we've got here. And what we wanted to highlight were some of the springs that allow you to just go in and just walk around. So this is an example of Three Sister Springs, which is one of the springs here in Florida as well. And again, crystal clear water. You could see the clarity of what's beneath that water with the sand and the different types of trees that are there on the top right. This is a great perspective. You could see the top and the bottom, and then you just walk right in and you can just walk around. Now, some springs don't allow you to get out and disturb sort of that ecosystem, as Sister Audrey alluded to earlier in her discussion. We'll talk about that in just a second. This one is a sample of, I believe this is also Weeki Wachee Springs, which is another spring here where you can kayak or you can paddleboard. but you're not allowed to get out of the water and disturb the ecosystem that's there. That's what Sister Audrey was talking about. And as you can see, especially around, for those of you that are interested in wanting to go to a spring and see and have a really good shot at seeing manatee, I hear that the best time to do it is right around like the October, November, the colder months, because at that point, the manatee are looking for warmer waters. And even though there's a constant temperature of around 72 degrees or so, the water in the bay where the manatee typically live, or out in the Gulf, they start to try to search for these warmer waters with respect to the wintertime, of course. And so that's when you'll start to see them. And they say that's when you'll probably get the best chance to see manatee live, like these folks did, when you're in the October, November months time frame. The
October,
water.
November with the temperature change. But if you want to catch the manatees with their families and their newborns, January, February, March, those are going
Oh,
to be, yeah, those are going to be the times that you see the pods of manatees. And that's when Brother RJ and I caught them at Wiki Wachi.
when you were there. Well, perfect. Well, and it's a great segue because here is Sister Audrey and Brother RJ in Wikiwachi at the same springs. And again, I'm just half the time I'm wondering like who photoshopped this. I want to know who photoshopped this to make the water that clear, because that it's just so crystal clear as you're looking down into the sand that's
And
down
it's
there.
not AI. This is from
Yeah.
a legit camera lens.
Yeah, we learned that last show, right, about how to tell the difference between AI and real photographs, and these are 100% real. Can you tell us a little bit about this experience?
Yeah, this was actually my first experience not being able to get in the water. So that was different. But for good reason, because I mean when you're passing over these specific springs, they run slower. So they're not like your lazy river like Ichitagni, Rainbow. Kelly Rock Springs is probably the fastest flowing because it's like for the name, it has a lot of rocky areas and rocky bottom. This Wiki Watch is probably the calmest, and for good reason, because this is like a manatee nesting ground in Florida, here specifically here closer to the Tampa Bay area. Not far at all from where you live, Brother Robert. It's like 30 minutes maybe, or 45 minutes away from the house. So because it's calmer, this is where they tend to breed and start their families. And as you're going over, you would never have known that that was manatee underneath you until suddenly a boulder starts to nudge at your leg. They're that calm. I mean, they don't, they're so friendly and sweet. They don't bother you. But yeah, they'll give you like a little nudge under the paddleboard just to be like, "Hey, let me move a little bit."
Just
And
letting
they'll,
you know that they're there, right? Is that what that is?
right, right. And they look like big boulders. I mean, they don't move fast at all. And they're just these gentle sea cows that just kind of chill out and enjoy their time living.
Well, as you can see, I've got a couple of sea cows right here with me. I decided, of course, in commemoration of today's Springs episode, we've got a couple of those sea cows that are sitting here, just watching us, looking over my shoulder. Well, and when you go through the springs like this, like you said, it's pretty slow. Are there, as you're kind of going through it, I'm imagining that that there aren't boats or anything that are probably coming through this part of the springs.
Correct. Yeah. And even then, I don't know the exact mechanics of boats, but you would have to be going at a very, very slow speed. I mean, to the point where you're probably not running that engine really. You're just kind of floating along,
Boating.
meandering along. Yeah. So, I mean, how was your experience yesterday with those boats trying to navigate around us on tubes? Because that could be
That
pretty
was
intimidating.
yeah. Considering it was my first time at the springs, and definitely, my experience with inner tubing was going around a lazy river at a resort. So the most difficult thing to navigate there are little kids that are jumping in front of you. But it was definitely a different experience when you're in. We were at Rainbow Springs, and as we're kind of navigating through with our inner tubes, you know, you've got the flow that's pulling you in one direction. And of course, my wife and I were tethered together. And so the one thing is you might want to decide which one of you is going to do the pulling, because if both of you try to do it, what's going to probably happen is you're going to just going to go in circles, because inevitably one of you is pulling one direction and the other is pulling the other direction. So, but once you get the hang of it and just go with the flow, so to speak, you can kind of navigate yourself through there. In the boats, at least the ones we experienced yesterday, there were jet skis, there were these big pontoon boats with people coming through, but they were all going super, super slow. They, of course, can go against the current. And as they were kind of traveling through, they were obviously very courteous to the multitude of inner tubers and kayakers that were there. So it was a good experience. I mean, it was kind of scary first going in because you don't know what to expect. Definitely the 72-degree water was a nice surprise. But I think once we started just kind of floating and then trying to clump together as a group, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, so if you're going to the Springs, group hack. If you're going with a big group, bring like a cord or like a thing of rope so you could link the tubes together. Not necessarily like tied around the tubes themselves because they have handles. Just link it that way, and you can still get in and out of your tube, but that way at least with a big group you can stay together, because truly once you get in the water, you are on your own.
It has a life of its own. Well, and that was, yeah, it's exactly true, because at one point my wife and I were like so far behind, it took a ton of work for us to catch up. And I was like, why there must be something wrong with the engine on my inner tube.
Eventually, but I think that group hack is most useful when someone starts to stray too close to the trees.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Keep the groups together, right? That's perfect. Well, and here's another one. And this one is actually from, I believe this is from Silver Springs. And here at Silver Springs, you can see again, you're traveling through on a kayak. Manatee, aka moving boulders, are found throughout as you're kind of walking through them. There's an example of a paddle boarder we saw earlier. The sister Audrey and brother RJ were also paddle boarding. But when you take a look at these photos, it's just these seem like just out of a fantasy novel, right? Out of a place that you wouldn't expect to actually exist. And again, these are not artificially generated photos, folks. These are actual pictures. Most of them, in fact, I think all the ones we're looking at today, taken from a mobile phone, cell phone. I mean, that's how beautiful and how clear these springs are. So, the springs are a great place, I think, for everyone to visit. As you heard, hundreds of them, thousands if you want to just jump into somebody's backyard. But, we've got hundreds of springs that are available for you to visit. We strongly encourage you to check out the springs in Florida, because the amusement parks, the beaches, they already get a lot of attention, but the springs here in Florida are definitely one of a kind. Not something you'll find anywhere else in the United States, as we said, and primarily that's because of the ecology, the way the ecosystem is set up here, and the way that these springs are produced. So I think for both Sister Audrey and myself and Sister Marisol, going to the springs yesterday was a nice, relaxing way to get the family together. You just all want to be able to enjoy a kind of a hassle-free couple of hours of recreation. I couldn't think of one better than sitting on an inner tube floating down a spring, right? So do we have any comments, Sister Marisol, in the chat, shout outs we can give?
We've got Mario Oka. Good evening here in the Philippines and enjoy watching. Greetings from the locale of Brixtonville, district of Caloocan North. Thank you so much for joining us from the Philippines. My gosh, it's so late in the evening. And then we have, of course, Sister Cassandra Gallion. Happy viewing to all listeners from Tampa, Florida, and good morning to the fabulous Florida INC team. Of course, we've got Brother Adrian Abelgas. Good morning, friends, and happy viewing. Living in the desert, my wife would say, so much water. Yes, because that's all Atta said when we were in Orlando.
Where's all this water coming from?
And then we've got also Sister Teresa Murph. Good morning to brethren from the local congregation, Kissimmee District, Florida. Sister Kathleah, thank you so much for joining us from Jersey. That's definitely a challenge, getting everyone up early. Yes, that is probably the most challenging part of the Springs. But if you're not tired when you're at the gate, you're not doing it right.
Exactly. You've got to be exhausted. I was.
That will wake you up.
Yes, that's the one way. Jump into that water. That'll wake you up.
Exactly.
Oh well, thank you so much, Sister Audrey, for catching those, and of course, thank you to all of our viewers. Sadly, we are once again to the top of the hour here because we are the fastest 30 minutes on radio, and of course, today is also a very sad day for us here because today is Sister Maricel's last day on radio. She got married a few weeks ago, and now she is going to be joining her husband in his new assignment overseas, which is going to take her away from us. So, Sister Maricel, thank you so much for having been with us all these years on INCRadio Florida. We are all going to miss you, and we've all benefited from all of the insight, scientific research that you provided for us. Now, I'm actually going to have to read books, get all the statistics and research that.
I'm going to miss Florida as well, but I know that I'll be excited to be listening from across the globe.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and of course, every week we try to come up with new topics that are going to be exciting and relatable to you if you are Floridian or if you're planning on exploring Florida. We want to be able to show you all the parts of Florida that maybe not too many people know about. So, but thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Sister Maricel, for the last couple of years of being such a great host with us. And thank you, Sister Audrey, who's here in Tampa as well, joining us yesterday at the Springs. I'm Brother Robert DePaulis for INC Radio Florida. Please stay tuned because INC Radio South Central States is coming